Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain, and today we begin our journey discussing the oddly divisive follow-up to one of the greatest television shows of all time. And we'll take this one book at a time because the sheer amount of stuff that happens in each book is enough material for a season twice as long, a point we'll expand on later. So, let's start with a bit of background before jumping into the plot. The Legend of Korra was greenlit by Nickelodeon after the original show essentially took over their channel in the mid-2000s. Notably, they were able to get most of the creative team from The Last Airbender back for this show as well, including, but obviously not limited to, the co-creators/writers and the excellent scoring talents of one Jeremy Zuckerman. The crazy thing is, Korra was only ever going to be a small miniseries at first, but as production moved along, in spite of some delays, Nick kept giving them more and more episodes. And then, the actual show did gangbusters ratings-wise, and eventually, we landed at the full 52. Oh, but trust me, that is exactly the point where Nick's generosity withered away. We'll get into that too, but that's more of a Book 3 discussion, so bear with me. The larger point is, everything leading up to Korra seemed promising, including its groundwork. As some of us know, the series was set some 70 years after The Last Airbender. The announcement, and subsequent bits of information released from 2010 till its 2012 premiere, provided just the medication needed for those of us that survived the other Last Airbender. Ugh. The most vital aspect of this show is its place in the Avatar mythos, since it's less of a direct sequel in the way the graphic novels are, and more of a next generation story. As such, the more humble, environmentally savvy backdrops and living situations of yesteryear have been fully replaced by a roaring 20s aesthetic. One of many not-so-subtle reminders that a lot can and has changed in 70 plus years. And the ways and means this change is expressed and dealt with makes up the backbone of the show. Now let's discuss all of that as we dig deeper into the plot itself. So we meet Korra, a fiery, tough-as-nails water triber from the south, and the new Avatar. She's mastered all but airbending because we didn't have a Book of Air last time, so might as well have one now. But on a more serious note, that really is the perfect way to start with Korra specifically, a character defined by aggression and impatience who needs to learn how to be just the opposite. And it presents us with a completely novel character arc for her to go through compared to when Aang needed to learn earthbending, a style that contradicts his nature, or firebending, a style he has a poor history with. But this is just one of many things that occur over the course of the first episode. We also get introduced to Republic City and the socioeconomic struggles of the same city. We meet a bunch of characters. We learn about the Equalists, who are just a confused bunch of people. We see Korra stop a crime, get arrested because vigilantes are a no-no here, then get unarrested, which somehow creates a change of heart in Tenzin, allowing Korra to stay on Air Temple Island, which leads to a press conference and the appearance of Amon and his godlike voice acting. Whew. To call this episode, and even this season to a lesser extent fast-paced, would be heavily underselling it. The first couple of episodes, but especially the first two, don't really have a break button. I don't mind that on the surface because the pilot accomplishes its job of introducing us to Korra and the current state of Avatar world affairs. That's fine. But that same approach becomes problematic when juxtaposed against the Equalists and what I suspect is the larger point of this book as a whole, a topic we'll talk plenty about. Episode 2, an episode centered around trying and failing to be patient, also speeds by too quickly. Within 22 minutes, we get a meaningful but lacking arc about Tenzin and Korra disagreeing heavily at first, an impasse that is resolved fairly easily by way of pro-bending and the fabulous bending brothers of Mako and Bolin. What we see is Korra mastering the airbending motions, or put another way, being the leaf, by way of a more modern approach to bending. It's a sensible solution, but it's not one that really feels earned, mainly because Korra was struggling with these same moves just 10 minutes prior. Even after Bolin gave her some quick pro-bending pointers, she only fails harder at her airbending training immediately after. While it makes sense that someone like Korra, who's trained all her life in physical bending, could reasonably win a pro-bending match, the incorporation of her airbending lessons should have at least shown some improvement out of the ring before being flawlessly executed in the ring. Because despite this breakthrough, Korra never actually airbends until episode 12. We, the audience, can only assume Tenzin's teaching gets lost somewhere in the plot, because at a certain point, her on-screen training gets cut out completely in favor of Tarlok-sponsored oppression. Amon's introduction in episode 1 comes to a head in episode 3, The Revelation. Basically, the brothers need money, Bolin acquires some, gets taken to Amon's rally, almost loses his bending but gets saved, and Korra is forced into a state of genuine fear for maybe the first time ever. Despite the brevity of my description, this episode is easily the best of the first three. It presents a peek into the past of Mako and Bolin, two stand-up, hardworking guys who were forced to live shadier lives after their parents were killed. It also more firmly establishes Amon as not just powerful, but absolutely worth fearing. Not only because he is presented as the very symbol of leveling the playing field, but because he can do so easily, unemotionally, and in ways that could take away the only aspect of life Korra is intimately familiar with, a life in which she has been watched over and carefully guarded throughout. And Steve Blum's cold, precise delivery is a perfect match for what they were going for here. All of these contrasting factors makes Amon the perfect character to force Korra into a breakdown. Even before the present day, she was brash, bold, and more than anything, fearless, and nothing about her guarded, heavily monitored upbringing was ever going to challenge those traits. But then in comes Amon. The emotional tenor set in place during this episode is well utilized going into episode 4, where Korra is initially hesitant to square off against the Equalist, despite Councilman Tarlok's many gifts, but she eventually gets played by him using a gala and social politics that Korra would never be able to see coming. Points to Tarlok already for being a step up from the also politically conniving Long Feng. The task force proceeds to take down the bad guys, which works as an alleviator of Korra's fears, so it makes perfect sense that she eventually becomes emboldened enough to challenge Amon one-on-one after a few small-scale victories that fit her style of problem solving. So she does that, and then the fear returns, because she got ambushed by an entire horde of Equalists? Well, so much for equality. And now it's time for all of that well-developed tension to vanish, so we can spend the entire next episode giving damn near every possible ship at this point some ammunition. The spirit of competition is basically its own breakdown topic, so we're going to save it for the end of this video. Skipping ahead to episode 6, Amon warns Republic City to cancel the Pro Bending Championship. The council actually agrees to this until Chief Beifong, who is just a great character in all respects, says screw that. So, let the games begin. A game that accomplishes the impossible, being more blatantly plagued by refball than even the current NFL. The fact that the now future industry Fire Ferrets almost pull off an upset anyways is a testament to how far they've come. Unlike with airbending, we see these three playing and training a fair bit. This would feel a bit more earned, however, if they deserve to be here, because by their own admission from the previous episode, they really don't. And now, Amon ambushes the stadium because, I guess, added security doesn't mean weapons checks at every possible entrance. You kind of have to assume Amon has an inside guy for all this, but that's 100% speculation. More than anything, we're just expected to believe in all of his godlike abilities, or the sheer unpreparedness of his enemies every step of the way. But the oddest thing to me is how it all concludes. Amon proclaims that the Wolfbats only won through blatant cheating, but there's nothing really done with that idea. It's implied that the ref was paid off, but so what? Even if they had one legitimately, Amon's overall view remains the same, so nothing about the plot really changes. And given what we later learn about the foundation of lies Amon stands on, it would have made perfect sense for him to have been the one manipulating the outcome. Making benders look like the bad guys is his entire MO, and he secretly wanted the council to go forward with the match. It would all line up for him if he had this inside man, or the ref, or whoever, convince the Wolfbats that beating the Avatar straight up would not be an easy feat. But if you maybe want to do some elemental mixing on the side, we maybe will look the other way. The Wolfbats, having recently been shook by said Avatar, would take the offer because 1, they never strike us as stand-up dudes concerned with the integrity of the game anyways, and 2, nobody seems to care that much that they cheated. Then, when Amon pulls the rug from under them, his stance wouldn't even be a full lie, because the Wolfbats still agreed to play dirty, regardless of the behind-the-scenes factors in play. They, more so than any of the triads, are the ideal conduits for Amon's message, because even non-benders cheer for and look up to them. And if they were exposed in a more affecting way, creating a community rift by way of pro-bending where there allegedly wasn't one before, then that parlays naturally into Tarlok's draconian law enforcement tactics, at which point, Amon essentially wins, as far as the court of popular opinion goes. But unfortunately, Amon is a consistently confusing villain for a variety of reasons. We'll look more deeply into him and the rest of the cast in part 2, or maybe even part 3 at this point. For better and for worse, this show is anything but simple. But since a lot of the first half romance ends up contaminating the second half, might as well get that out of the way now. For those happy few of you who are intimately aware of my disdain for love triangles, due in large part to one very specific example pissing me off to no end, my position here will not surprise you. The Spirit of Competition is an episode I wish was disposable filler. It's an episode that can't help but cram and rush through all of these complex emotions for no discernible reason. Korra comes off as kind of bad because she knows exactly what Bolin is asking and agrees anyways, and her overall understanding of romance proves wildly inconsistent throughout. Mako comes off as much worse because he's sitting there thinking about how much sense it makes to date Asami over Korra. And, hypocrisy because don't date your teammates, and then he does just that. Plus, Mako specifically never really feels bad or grows meaningfully from any of this, even as confusion continues to fester later in the season. I guess it's not that surprising that both of his relationships ended up done and dusted later on. And then there's this really awkward scene with Bolin. A heartbreaking moment, or so we think, ruined by the show's obsession with trying to make Bolin funny at all the wrong times. And now we the audience are left thinking of his heartbreak, his former feelings for Korra, and honestly Bolin himself as just one big joke. And what is there to be learned from any of this? Nothing. Nothing at all. Just like every love, whatever stupid shape we're dealing with this time, nothing impactful is done with the complications these situations cause. Maybe Mako's fear of commitment is rooted inside a deeper fear of not wanting to let anyone down. But since he's the tough guy, we never really get a deeper take on the subject of what relationships mean to him. And Bolin practically has a new girlfriend every season, in addition to doing whatever the plot tells him to do, so forget about him reflecting on things. And what's more, the Fire Ferrets still win. That really worked out in the middle of things, since Bolin got to hard carry while not being emotionally strung out. That was the smart call. But in the semi-final match, everyone's in a rut, and they still win because reasons. And because they collect their hollow victory, everyone can just move on until the understandably frustrated Asami questions what's up. It's all just so tedious and so roundabout and so tiring. You can have a nuanced romantic subplot without having it hijacked by terrible, inconsistent character choices. Choices that are never really punished, even though episode 6 could have operated in mostly the same way, even without the Fire Ferrets headlining. And sadly enough, it's the type of plot thread that continues to hang around in subsequent books, but ultimately adds a grand total of nothing to the characters outside of Asami. They even have the nerve to reset the damn thing later on, effectively creating the same triangle again because Mako screws up. Again. It's like if the folks from the Great Divide kept showing up periodically because reasons, and kept getting in the way of Aang's training and or the plot of any given episode. Yeah, it would have been bad. Sad to say, guys, but this whole damn internal team conflict is the Gan Jins versus the Zangs of Korra. And now that that's done, until we have to talk about it again, we can discuss the second half of the plot, Tarlok's rise and fall, Amon's so-called vision, and more in part 2. There's a lot to say about the multitude of plot threads here and plenty of breakdown to follow. So until then, thanks for watching.